cultural plunge involved me going to a restaurant that offers a dining in the dark experience to give people who have sight an opportunity to see what it's like to navigate a world without vision. Opaque is a restaurant where the waiters and waitresses are either visually impaired or blind. The restaurant is attached to a nightclub called Senator Jones. The lounge area for Senator Jones is used as a waiting area for the people who have reservations to Opaque. I chose this experience because I define myself as a person with sight. Oftentimes, when we think of defining who we are, we think of our traits and beliefs. We oftentimes forget about the differences in our abilities and how these differences make us who we are. Prior to visiting Opaque, I already knew the concept behind the dining in the dark experience and how the waiters were either blind or visually impaired. One of the things I really thought of before going in was the difficulty of the experience. Having a brother who was blind growing up, I've seen him navigate the world so effortlessly, and I think seeing that as a kid and as an adult, I never really took into account the difficulty it would be going from having sight to not having sight. This is a picture of me and Maggie. Maggie was my waitress for the night. She shared her story about how she developed glaucoma in her 20s, which resulted in her losing her sight. She discussed the hardship of being a single mother, oftentimes asking her child if what she was giving her was milk. She talked about how she struggled to face the fact that she had lost her sight, but knew she had to persevere and stay strong for her child. She also expressed how the dining in the dark experience provides people with sight an opportunity to reflect on how much they depend on their vision and what it's like for people with no sight or partial sight. Before my dinner, I was sat at a lounge table with the couple who had made a reservation at the same time. I was extremely nervous going into the dinner because I knew that I would probably be experiencing what my older brother had been experiencing his whole life, and that's something that really scared me. I was actually so nervous that I ordered a drink before going in. The hostess explained to us what we would experience and told us to wait for our waitress to be called out. It was my turn to be escorted to my table. I put my right hand on Maggie's right shoulder and we walked through a pitch black hallway. She sat me down at my table and began giving me my 3-course meal. During my dinner, I felt really uneasy, even with it being sat near a wall, which kind of served as a security blanket. However, the uneasiness came from not knowing the rest of my surroundings. I was concerned about dropping my drink, and the fear of the dead silence behind me kept me hesitant from moving my body. I slowly moved my hands throughout the night to feel for my drink and food, and at some point I faced my fear head on and turned my body around towards the silence and sat there for a minute. It was then I got extremely emotional, having spent a lot of my childhood assisting my brother and asking him about his experiences to try to understand what his life was like was nothing compared to what I was experiencing in the moment at the dinner. After my experience, I was asked to relax in the lounge for a bit so that my eyes could adjust. I thanked Maggie and she wished me well on my project. Days after my experience, I was still emotional and reflecting on the differences of my life and what it could be like for others. During my experience, it was hard to really feel out how others viewed me. From all of the conversations and laughter I could hear, people were so focused on themselves and navigating their dinner, there was no time to check up on strangers around you. During my experience, there were 4 neurodevelopment constructs that were activated: attention, spatial ordering, memory, and language. The attention construct was activated because I was so focused on what I had to do that my awareness of my surroundings was heightened. Spatial ordering and memory go hand in hand. I had to define where I was in a context that was unfamiliar to me. I also arranged objects in a way that was easier for me to memorize. Language was also a key construct that was active. Being in the dark, it's hard to read body language, so oral language was used a lot to express my wants and needs to Maggie. This assignment helped me define myself in a more broader sense. Even with defining oneself as having sight, I could tell that other people in the restaurant were having experiences different than my own. There are many aspects that can define a person. The understanding of the multiple ways someone can define themselves will help guide my instruction and aid in connecting with my future students as an educator.